Good evening. Welcome once more to Unwind University, where the quiet whispers of history offer a peaceful pathway to relaxation. Tonight, we begin a very gentle journey, allowing our minds to drift slowly back in time, to explore the subtle, quiet echoes of a truly remarkable intellect. We will consider a mind that, in its own deliberate way, seemed to peer into the distant future, understanding possibilities long before others grasped them. Imagine, if you will, the slow, steady turning of a mechanism, each movement setting in motion a cascade of profound ideas, each a thoughtful step ahead of its own immediate era. This was not a hurried sprint towards innovation, but rather a contemplative, patient progression of deeply considered thought. It was a mind quietly constructing intricate blueprints for worlds yet to be imagined. The brilliance was not a sudden, dazzling flash, but rather a consistent internal glow, steadily illuminating pathways few had considered exploring. Such profound foresight often walks hand in hand with a certain measure of solitude. A life so deeply woven with threads of intense, internal thought can sometimes mean a gentle separation from the more hurried, often louder, pace of daily life. Picture a quiet study, perhaps, or a solitary, unhurried walk through natural spaces, where outer world demands fade and the vast, intricate internal landscape of ideas becomes the most vibrant reality. Within this serene introspection, complex patterns might slowly unfold, understood initially by perhaps only a singular individual. These intertwining threads of quiet brilliance and profound solitude together formed a unique tapestry, rich with theoretical insights and patient, understated observations. Our gentle journey tonight invites us not to rush through events, but simply to observe, to feel the quiet, underlying resonance of a mind dedicated to understanding. We will take our time, allowing the soft cadence of its historical presence to guide us, focusing not on overt actions, but on the steady, thoughtful hum of a life dedicated to knowledge and foresight. As we continue to explore this fascinating existence, we will very slowly and deliberately peel back the layers of its quiet contributions, allowing the gentle power of these historical echoes to softly settle upon our consciousness. There is a deeply calming rhythm to this measured discovery, a profound satisfaction in patiently tracing the origins of ideas that quietly continue to shape our present and inform our future, all without haste and without any sense of urgency. Our journey takes us now to a small, tranquil village, nestled within a quiet valley of the Austrian Empire, a place called Smiljan. It was there, amidst the verdant hills and the clear, starlit nights of July in the year 1856, that Nikola Tesla first entered this world. He was born, as if by some quiet cosmic design, to a family whose very essence seemed to anticipate the unique qualities he would later embody. A child destined to observe the world with an uncommon intensity, and to eventually harness the unseen forces that pulse through it, much like the gentle, consistent rhythm of the Smiljan landscape itself. The village of Smiljan offered a childhood steeped in the simple grandeur of nature. Surrounded by forests and the distant, ever-present mountains, life moved at a pace that allowed for deep contemplation. The gentle rustle of leaves, the whisper of the wind through the tall grasses, and the vast, unblemished expanse of the night sky above were his earliest companions. It was a setting perfectly suited for a mind that would, from its very earliest moments, find fascination in the subtle workings of the natural world, observing patiently and absorbing everything with an almost ethereal stillness. His father, Milutin, served as an Orthodox priest, a man of profound contemplation and extensive learning, often seen with his head buried in books, his words measured and thoughtful. His mother, Duka Mandic, though unschooled in the formal sense, possessed a remarkable memory and a prodigious talent for crafting tools and household devices from everyday materials. She could solve complex practical problems with an innate ingenuity, an imaginative and resourceful spirit that very clearly ran in the family, providing the quiet yet powerful blueprint for the innovative path her son would one day follow with such unwavering dedication. Within this tranquil landscape, surrounded by the rhythm of seasons and the vast expanse of the night sky, the young Nikola found a deep well of inspiration. He was indeed, in a quiet sense, a child of both storms and still observation. He watched the lightning flash across the horizon, listening to the thunder reverberate through the valley. And then, with equal quiet focus, he would gaze at the distant, sparkling stars, each one a tiny point of light in the immense darkness. These early, silent observations were not mere childish distractions, but rather the very first stirrings of a mind uniquely attuned to the universe's subtle dance, a mind quietly gathering its initial impressions. As the days turned into years within this peaceful cradle, the subtle stirrings of a most extraordinary mind began to quietly manifest, slowly preparing us for the gentle unfolding of his earliest and most curious insights. These initial glimpses into his unique way of seeing the world, these first quiet sparks of what would become a formidable intellectual journey, will be the focus of our next exploration, as we very slowly and deliberately consider the early sparks of genius. As the gentle flow of time continued, and the quiet child within that peaceful landscape slowly began to grow, something distinctly unusual started to manifest itself. It wasn't a sudden burst of brilliance, but rather a subtle, deepening current beneath the surface of his everyday awareness, hinting at a mind that perceived the world in a profoundly different way from most. The ordinary sights and sounds around him seemed to resonate with an uncommon depth, stirring a quiet curiosity that sought to understand more than just what lay immediately visible to the eye. This emerging mind became a place filled with vivid images, a rich inner landscape where observations were not merely recorded, but intricately woven together. He might gaze at the play of light on water for long stretches, not just seeing the shimmering surface, but perhaps sensing the deeper currents, the unseen forces shaping the ripples and reflections. The changing patterns of clouds, the intricate veins of a leaf, the silent growth of a plant from a tiny seed, these were not simply parts of his environment, but profound mysteries waiting to be patiently observed, to be gently considered in the quiet corners of his thoughts. There was a deep, persistent fascination that began to take root, a quiet pull towards the hidden forces of the natural world. He didn't just notice the rain, but perhaps wondered about its journey from cloud to earth, and then back again, an endless cycle quietly unfolding. the way a shadow lengthened and shifted with the passing hours, or how the wind moved unseen through the trees, creating rustling melodies. These were not casual observations, but rather invitations to ponder the invisible mechanisms at play, the subtle energies that shaped the very fabric of his surroundings. It was an early, intuitive seeking for the underlying patterns, the unspoken rules that governed the world around him. This quiet blossoming of an exceptional mind, with its vivid inner world and its profound, unhurried contemplation of nature's veiled truths, marked the true beginning of his intellectual awakening. These were the gentle sparks, illuminating a path that would soon lead him beyond mere observation into more structured forms of learning and deeper personal reflection. Soon we shall quietly turn our attention to the period of his more formal education and the earliest whispers of his unfolding dreams. With his intellectual curiosity now quietly stirred, the time came for a more structured engagement with knowledge. He embarked upon his studies with a profound sense of purpose, not merely attending to lessons, but immersing himself in the very fabric of learning. Each textbook, each lecture, each problem presented a new frontier for his eager mind to explore. He delved deeply into the principles of mathematics, the subtle intricacies of physics, and the foundational elements of engineering, understanding that these were the silent languages of the universe he sought to comprehend and, eventually, to reshape. His dedication often extended far beyond the conventional hours of study. Many nights, as the rest of the world drifted into slumber, a faint light would still emanate from his quiet workspace. Sleep became a secondary consideration, gently postponed in favor of wrestling with a particularly challenging equation, or pondering a theoretical concept until its inner workings were fully clear. This was not a restless struggle, but a deep, focused engagement, where the quiet hum of his concentration filled the silent hours, pushing the boundaries of his understanding with an almost serene persistence. Even in these hours of intense absorption, his mind was rarely confined to the present text. While absorbing established knowledge, a parallel process unfolded within his thoughts. He was perpetually sketching designs, not on paper, but in the vast, intricate workshop of his imagination. These were not mere fanciful drawings, but detailed mental constructs of machines yet to exist. Gears turned, circuits connected, forces were harnessed, and invisible energies were guided, all within the silent theater of his intellect. Each new piece of acquired knowledge seemed to click into place, adding another dimension to these evolving, complex mental blueprints, shaping his earliest dreams of what the future might hold. These burgeoning ideas, born of intense study and a restless, inventive spirit, hinted at a future far beyond his immediate surroundings. As his understanding deepened and his internal collection of designs grew, so too did a quiet awareness that the scope of his ambitions might eventually outgrow the confines of his current world. A faint yet persistent whisper began to suggest that his true opportunities, the places where his visions could truly take tangible form, might lie elsewhere, perhaps across a great expanse. It was a gentle, unhurried realization, a slow unfolding of destiny. The stage was gradually being set for a momentous transition, for a journey that would carry his inventive spirit to new shores, across a vast ocean. Soon we shall quietly observe the quiet preparations for this significant voyage, a passage that would lead him to a different land and the opportunity to truly begin building the future he had so meticulously designed in his mind. And so, with the quiet resolve of one embarking on a preordained path, the time arrived for Nikola Tesla to cross the vast expanse he had long contemplated. His pockets were indeed light, holding but a few foreign coins, mere tokens of the old world he was leaving behind. His mind, however, was brimming, overflowing with intricate designs and the vibrant glow of electric visions, concepts he deeply hoped would find fertile ground in this new, distant land of America. It was a passage not just across an ocean, but into a future he had meticulously planned within the quiet chambers of his thoughts. The journey across the Atlantic was not one of hurried anticipation, but of a slow, steady passage. Days blended into weeks, each one marked by the rhythmic churn of the ship's engines and the seemingly endless horizon. It was a time for contemplation, for refining the already perfect images of his inventions. There were minor disturbances, perhaps the loss of a precious train ticket or a small unfortunate theft of his sparse belongings, but these were fleeting moments. They were easily overshadowed by the profound internal world he carried, a world populated by dynamos and currents, circuits and coils, all whispering promises of a different kind of power for the world. The vastness of the ocean mirrored the vastness of the dreams he cradled. When the ship finally docked in the bustling port of New York, it was a sensory awakening, a gentle assault of new sights and sounds. The air was filled with a different kind of energy, a vibrant hum that spoke of possibility and relentless activity. This was the America he had envisioned, a place where innovation was not just tolerated but celebrated, where his alternating current dreams might finally take tangible form. He arrived with little more than the clothes on his back and the profound conviction that his ideas possessed immense value, awaiting only the right ears to listen, the right eyes to see. His immediate task was to secure a foothold, to find someone who could appreciate the silent power he carried within his mind. The path was not immediately clear, but a certain name, a prominent figure in the realm of electricity, would soon enter his orbit, marking the very first chapter of his American experience. This initial encounter would be with the most celebrated inventor of the age, a man whose own work, though different in approach, also sought to harness the power of electricity for the benefit of all. This meeting would set the stage for a brief yet significant period of collaboration, a quiet prelude to his own truly independent endeavors. Indeed, upon his arrival in New York City, the young immigrant found himself in the bustling environment of Thomas Edison's operations. He began working at Edison's Machine Works, initially engaged in the practical repair and improvement of direct current, DC, dynamos, and motors. It was a very hands-on experience, focusing on making existing electrical machinery more reliable and efficient. This collaboration was a meeting of two different approaches. Edison, the pragmatic inventor with a relentless focus on commercial application, and the young newcomer who possessed a more theoretical and visionary understanding of electricity, constantly contemplating grander, more efficient systems. Their time together, though brief, served as a quiet initiation into the American industrial landscape. Edison, a man of immense practical genius, was deeply committed to his direct current system, which he had successfully deployed across many cities to power his incandescent light bulbs. His method was about immediate solutions, about tangible products that could be installed and used right away. Our young engineer, however, harbored different visions. His mind, ever drawn to the elegance and untapped potential of alternating current, saw possibilities for power transmission that far exceeded the limitations of DC. He would often suggest radical modifications and entirely new designs for Edison's dynamos, ideas that, while brilliant, were perhaps too far ahead of their time or simply not aligned with Edison's established infrastructure and business model. This initial collaboration, as hinted, was indeed short-lived. While Edison undeniably recognized the young man's exceptional talent and ingenuity, their fundamental philosophies regarding the future of electrical engineering began to quietly diverge. It was not a matter of personal animosity, but rather a clash of practical genius focused on the present versus visionary idealism focused on the future. Their paths, though crossing for a significant period, were ultimately destined to separate, as each held a profoundly different perspective on how best to harness and distribute the nascent power of electricity. This parting was simply a natural consequence of their differing scientific and commercial outlooks. With this quiet departure, our engineer would soon embark on his own path, free to pursue his grander conceptions of alternating current with renewed dedication. But the separation of these two great minds was more than just a personal event in the annals of invention. It quietly foreshadowed a much larger, more public debate, one that would soon engulf the burgeoning electrical industry. This profound disagreement over which form of electricity, Edison's direct current or the young engineer's favored alternating current, would ultimately illuminate the world, shaping the very infrastructure we know today. This looming conflict, often spoken of as the conflict of currents, would soon become the central drama in the electrification of modern society. The burgeoning electrical industry, rapidly expanding its reach, found itself at a quiet but profound crossroads. This period became known, quite aptly, as the conflict of currents, though it was less a conflict of cannon fire and more a steady, persistent contest of ideas and engineering principles. At stake was the very foundation of how electricity would be delivered to homes and factories, a decision that would quietly shape modern infrastructure for generations. On one side stood direct current, or DC, championed by Thomas Edison. This system, the pioneer of early incandescent lighting, flowed in a single, unwavering direction. While straightforward, DC faced a significant limitation. It could not be efficiently transmitted over long distances without substantial power loss. To maintain voltage, power stations needed to be built every few miles, making widespread electrification a costly and complex endeavor, particularly for larger areas. Arrayed against DC was alternating current, or AC, championed by Nikola Tesla and supported by George Westinghouse. AC reversed its direction many times per second, allowing its voltage to be easily stepped up or down using transformers. This meant electricity could be generated at high voltages, transmitted hundreds of miles with minimal loss, then safely reduced to usable voltage for homes and businesses from a single, distant power plant. This flexibility was its key advantage. The conflict itself unfolded as a series of technical demonstrations, patent disputes, and public relations efforts. Proponents of each system presented their arguments to investors and city councils. Edison, protective of his established DC system, voiced concerns about the higher voltages of AC, subtly suggesting it was inherently more dangerous. It was a contest of practicality versus perceived risk, of established comfort versus innovative efficiency, quietly guiding the future. Ultimately, this quiet but impactful struggle was a crucial chapter in the story of electrification. The world, perhaps not fully grasping the technical nuances, nonetheless awaited the outcome, knowing their future homes would soon be illuminated by a new kind of power. As the industry matured, the superior economics and engineering flexibility of one system would gradually become undeniable, paving the way for its widespread adoption and forever changing how we draw power from the grid. The quiet determination within the electrical industry eventually gave way to a clearer path forward. The engineering flexibility and the inherent economic advantages of one particular system, as observed by a growing number of engineers and investors, became undeniably apparent. This favored system was alternating current, or AC, and at its heart lay the elegant solutions proposed by Nikola Tesla. His inventive mind conceived of polyphase alternating current systems and, crucially, the alternating current motor, a device that operated smoothly and efficiently, requiring minimal maintenance. This motor, quite unlike its direct current counterparts, did not demand sparking commutators, which meant less wear, less heat, and greater reliability in continuous operation. It was a quieter, more robust workhorse, destined to become the unseen engine of the modern age, gently swaying the future in its favor. The real genius of alternating current, however, truly revealed itself in its capacity for long-distance transmission. Unlike direct current, which suffered significant energy loss over even modest distances, AC could be easily transformed. Step-up transformers could elevate the voltage to very high levels for efficient travel across miles of wire, minimizing current and thus heat loss. Once near its destination, step-down transformers could then safely reduce the voltage to usable levels for factories, businesses, and homes. This simple yet profound ability to alter voltage with ease meant that power plants no longer needed to be situated directly within or immediately adjacent to the cities they served. They could be built in more remote locations, perhaps near the abundant power of a waterfall or close to coal mines, making the generation of electricity more cost-effective and geographically flexible. As the years unfolded, this efficiency and flexibility allowed for the construction of vast electrical grids. Power could travel from hydroelectric dams far upriver or from large steam-powered generating stations, reaching ever further across the landscape. Towns and villages that had once been too distant for economical electrification by direct current could now be included in this expanding network. This gradual expansion was not marked by dramatic pronouncements, but by the steady hum of new transformers and the quiet erection of transmission lines, slowly weaving a web of power across continents. The world was being connected, not with grand fanfare, but with the steady, pulsing rhythm of alternating current. The triumph of alternating current was less a sudden victory and more a quiet, undeniable integration into the fabric of daily life. Factories began to hum with the smooth operation of AC motors, driving machinery with newfound efficiency. Streetcars glided along tracks powered from distant substations. Slowly, quietly, the capabilities of this system began to touch more and more aspects of human endeavor, from industrial production to urban transport. It made the prospect of a universally available, affordable electric supply a tangible reality rather than a distant dream. With the fundamental challenges of power generation and efficient transmission largely addressed, a new horizon began to appear. The infrastructure was maturing, the technology was proven, and the promise of electricity was ready to fulfill its most visible role. The ability to bring reliable power to every dwelling, to transform darkness into light, was now within reach, preparing the way for an age where entire communities would be illuminated. The promise of widespread illumination, once a distant vision, now began to take a tangible form. Communities, large and small, were poised to experience the profound change that electric light could bring. No longer would the evening hours be solely dependent on the flickering flame of gas or oil. A new era was dawning, where darkness itself would yield to a gentle, steady radiance, transforming the very fabric of human activity after sunset. This was not merely an advancement, it was a fundamental shift in the quiet rhythm of daily life. Indeed, the dramatic possibilities of this new electrical age were perhaps nowhere more beautifully showcased than at the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. There, an entire city of temporary structures and grand exhibits was brought to life, not by the sun, but by thousands upon thousands of electric lights. These systems, the culmination of diligent work and persistent innovation, bathed the fairgrounds in an unprecedented soft glow. Visitors wandered through illuminated avenues, their faces lit by the steady brilliance, experiencing a spectacle that seemed to erase the boundary between day and night, a quiet testament to human ingenuity. Beyond such dazzling displays, the true power of these electrical systems was also being harnessed on an even grander scale. The immense, raw energy of Niagara Falls, a natural wonder of unparalleled majesty, was slowly, deliberately brought under control. Powerful generators transformed the kinetic force of the cascading water into electrical current, a silent, unseen river of energy. This generated power then began its journey, quietly flowing through wires, ready to serve a much broader purpose. It was a vital step in extending that soft glow far beyond any single city, promising to spread across a wider landscape. This measured expansion of electrical infrastructure meant that the quiet hum of generators and the soft illumination of electric lamps were no longer confined to experimental laboratories or grand exhibitions. They began to permeate everyday existence. Homes acquired their first electric lights, offices hummed with newfound efficiency, and street corners, once shrouded in shadow, offered a comforting pool of light. The continent itself slowly started to embrace this transformation, a network of wires quietly weaving through the landscape, bringing a consistent, reliable brightness to countless lives. As this tangible, visible light spread, changing the way people lived and worked, another, more subtle possibility was beginning to emerge, almost unnoticed in the glow. If electricity could travel through wires to illuminate a lamp or power a distant motor, perhaps it could also be persuaded to carry information, not through a physical connection, but through the very air itself. The whispers of such a concept, of invisible waves carrying messages without wires, were starting to drift on the breeze, suggesting a future where even the most distant voices might be heard. The idea, barely a murmur on the scientific wind, of messages traveling without wires found fertile ground in the mind of Nikola Tesla. While others were deeply engrossed in electrical current flowing predictably through solid conductors, Tesla's imagination drifted beyond these tangible paths. He listened to those faint whispers about invisible waves, not as a fleeting notion, but as a profound possibility, a truth yet to be fully understood. Long before many others considered it a serious prospect, Tesla began to envision a future fundamentally altered by this unseen force. He dreamt of information, thoughts, and connections transcending physical barriers, carried across vast distances on invisible currents through the very air. It was a grand, almost poetic vision of humanity linked not by copper cables, but by an ethereal network, always present, always ready. He did not merely dream. With his characteristic intensity, Tesla began to translate these ethereal concepts into quiet, tangible experiments within his laboratories. He tinkered and observed, gently pushing the boundaries of electricity's behavior. His early efforts focused on proving that signals, faint though they might be, could indeed be sent through the atmosphere, riding upon these elusive waves without a physical guide. It was a painstaking process, often yielding subtle results rather than dramatic flashes. Yet, with each successful transmission, each flicker of a distant light without a connecting wire, or the quiet click of a receiver responding to an unseen pulse, Tesla gathered further evidence. He was, in essence, trying to coax the air itself to become a messenger, to reveal its capacity for carrying intricate patterns of information, unseen by the casual observer. This pioneering work, quiet and often unheralded, laid the conceptual groundwork for much of what was to follow in wireless communication. It spoke of a future where invisible waves would connect homes, cities, and eventually entire continents. As his quiet experiments continued, and his vision grew ever grander, Tesla began to contemplate not just sending a few signals, but building something truly monumental to realize this global dream, a dream that would soon rise into being as Wardencliffe. With his ambition quietly solidified, and his understanding of unseen forces growing ever deeper, Nikola Tesla turned his full attention to realizing a truly monumental endeavor. He envisioned not merely improved communication, but a world bathed in an invisible network, where energy and information could flow freely to anyone, anywhere. It was a vision that required a physical manifestation of significant scale, something more profound than the small experimental setups he had used before. And so, the plans for Wardencliffe began to take shape, first on paper, then on a chosen site on Long Island, a place that would soon hold his grandest hopes. He began construction on a towering structure, a grand vision for global wireless power and communication, standing quietly against the sky. This was not just another laboratory. It was to be the heart of a global system, a magnificent, almost sculptural wooden tower reaching high into the air, crowned by a large copper dome. Below the surface, intricate tunnels and metal foundations were laid, designed to anchor the entire enterprise and to provide a crucial connection to the very Earth itself. It was a silent, ambitious assertion against the wide, open sky, a testament to what Tesla believed was possible, a tangible embodiment of his most profound dreams for humanity. The purpose of Wardencliffe was truly ambitious in its scope. Tesla imagined a future where news and messages could be sent across oceans without wires, reaching distant lands with ease, fostering a new kind of global connection. More than that, he dreamed of transmitting electrical energy itself through the earth and the atmosphere, providing illumination and power to remote villages, to ships at sea, or to homes far from any power plant, all without the need for cumbersome cables. It was a vision of universal access, a quiet revolution promising to uplift and connect all people, making modern conveniences available to everyone, everywhere, in a calm and unassuming manner. As the Wardencliffe Tower slowly ascended, piece by careful piece, it stood as a beacon of Tesla's unwavering belief in the potential of unseen forces. For him, it represented the culmination of years of quiet experimentation and deep thought, a grand symphony of scientific principles put into tangible form. It was a silent promise of a more connected, more empowered world, a testament to the boundless possibilities that lay just beyond the grasp of ordinary understanding. However, as the structure neared its completion, and as the immense scale of this global ambition truly settled in, the path toward fully realizing such a pioneering dream would begin to reveal its own distinct set of complexities and demands, quietly waiting in the wings. The immense scope of the endeavor, though deeply compelling to him, often presented considerable challenges that went far beyond mere technical intricacies. Indeed, the path toward realizing such a pioneering dream quickly began to reveal a distinct set of complexities, demanding much more than just scientific ingenuity. Foremost among these demands was the persistent need for substantial financial resources, an elusive commodity that frequently shadowed his every step. The very scale of his vision, grand and far-reaching as it was, required an equally grand investment, often difficult to secure from a world not yet prepared to fully grasp its future implications. Gathering the necessary funds became a constant, wearying task. There were periods of hopeful pledges, followed by quiet withdrawals, and then renewed efforts to persuade and explain. These financial struggles were not mere inconveniences. They were substantial obstacles that could slow progress, halt construction, and delay the very realization of his most ambitious designs. Each setback, each negotiation, each uncertain delay pulled his attention away from the pure pursuit of scientific discovery, placing instead a heavy emphasis on the practicalities of worldly commerce. Beyond the immediate concerns of funding, there lay an even deeper, more pervasive challenge, a widespread lack of understanding for his truly far-reaching ideas. The concepts he explored, the future he envisioned, were often so advanced, so entirely outside the common experience of his time, that many found them difficult to comprehend, let alone support with unwavering conviction. His peers, and even potential benefactors, struggled to see past the immediate, the tangible, to fully appreciate the profound, transformative potential of his work. This gulf in understanding could be profoundly isolating. This combination of persistent financial struggle and the often unbridgeable chasm of comprehension meant that his journey frequently became a lonely one. He walked a path largely unseen, pursuing a future that only he could fully articulate, often with little sustained companionship or deep intellectual resonance from those around him. This solitude, however, also fostered a unique kind of internal resilience, shaping the very fabric of his character. It was within this quiet, often solitary space that his singular perspectives, and indeed his distinct personal habits, truly began to take root and flourish. The quiet solitude that had increasingly defined Nikola Tesla's existence also served as a fertile ground for the cultivation of unique personal habits and an extraordinary way of perceiving the world. His daily life unfolded with a particular rhythm, a series of precise routines that, to an outside observer, might have seemed peculiar. Yet, for him, they formed an essential framework, a stable anchor for the profound currents of thought that flowed ceaselessly within his mind. These established patterns provided a necessary calm, allowing his inner world the space it needed to expand and explore. One might observe, for instance, his particular focus on numbers, often manifesting in his actions, like walking around a block 3 times, or carefully calculating the cubic volume of his food portions with an almost ritualistic precision. His meals were frequently solitary affairs, taken with quiet deliberation, his focus seemingly elsewhere, even as his eyes registered every minute detail of his surroundings. This wasn't merely eccentricity. It was part of a larger, internal system, a method of structuring his external reality to facilitate the deep and constant mental work he undertook. Indeed, his brilliant mind was very often lost in its own intricate thoughts. While his physical body might be present, seated in a restaurant or strolling through a park, his consciousness frequently traveled far beyond the immediate. He explored realms of engineering, physics, and invention, existing only within his expansive intellect at that moment. He possessed an acute sensitivity to the world's subtle aspects, a keenness of observation that allowed him to notice minute vibrations, faint sounds, or barely perceptible shifts in light, details most others would entirely overlook. These sensory inputs were meticulously processed and integrated into the vast tapestry of his internal landscape, becoming fuel for his conceptual journeys. It was within this deeply personal, intensely active mental space that his most profound insights were born. His mind, unburdened by conventional thinking and finely tuned to the underlying principles of the universe, moved with a freedom and depth that allowed him to conceptualize ideas far ahead of his contemporaries. This unique mental process, fostered by his solitude, laid the ground for concepts that would only much later be fully grasped. They were detailed blueprints of a future yet to arrive, visions illustrating a profound foresight that truly reached far beyond his own era. His unique insights, cultivated in quiet contemplation, did not merely exist as fleeting thoughts. They were diligently recorded, documented in a methodical manner across countless pages of his private notebooks. These journals became silent archives of a mind truly operating in a different temporal dimension, sketching out realities that his contemporaries would have found utterly fantastical, perhaps even impossible to properly comprehend in their own understanding. Within these handwritten records, one could find detailed contemplations on autonomous machines, concepts we would later come to understand as early forms of robotics. He envisioned devices capable of operating without direct human intervention, performing tasks independently, guided by pre-programmed instructions. Furthermore, the idea of controlling objects or mechanisms from a significant distance through what we now commonly refer to as remote controls also appeared frequently. These were not vague imaginings, but often contained diagrams and theoretical explanations, suggesting practical applications for guiding vessels or operating machinery without physical contact. Perhaps even more remarkably, His thoughts drifted consistently towards the revolutionary notion of transmitting energy through the air, without the need for cumbersome wires or cables. This concept of wireless energy transmission, a dream that continues to captivate and challenge engineers in our own time, was explored with considerable depth. He theorized about sending power across vast distances, illuminating homes or powering devices through an invisible current, a vision of ubiquitous, freely available energy that transcended the practicalities of his era. These detailed blueprints for automatons, for distant command, and for an ethereal flow of power were not mere speculative fiction. They represented genuine attempts to grapple with the fundamental principles of physics and engineering, pushing the boundaries of what was considered achievable. The very existence of such ideas, articulated with clarity in his own time, underscores how truly far his intellectual reach extended, presenting solutions and technologies that often still feel remarkably futuristic even in our modern world. It was as if he held a clear window to the future, diligently documenting what he saw unfolding before him. The intensity of this visionary work, the constant mental engagement with these profound, forward-looking ideas, consumed much of his time and energy. As the years progressed, his life became increasingly defined by this relentless pursuit of scientific understanding and the solitary development of his theories, a path that slowly led him further into his own unique world of thought and quiet dedication. Following the intense focus on his groundbreaking theories, the rhythm of his life gradually, almost imperceptibly, began to slow its outward pace. The world beyond his immediate intellectual concerns seemed to recede into the distance, a faint, distant murmur barely penetrating the deep concentration he maintained. Social engagements, never a primary interest, diminished further, not with any sharp decision, but simply as a natural consequence of his profound absorption. He found less reason to seek out company, and those who might have sought his eventually came to understand his quiet preference for solitude. As the years continued to wear on, the quiet corridors of his own mind became his most frequent dwelling place. The constant hustle of city life, the mundane concerns of daily commerce, these things became increasingly peripheral to his existence. In their stead, a different, more gentle kind of companionship began to flourish. He developed a tender connection with the pigeons that frequented his windowsills and courtyards. Their soft, persistent cooing, the gentle flutter of their wings, their entirely undemanding presence offered a quiet, steadfast comfort. They asked for nothing but a little kindness, and in return, they provided a steady, living backdrop to his ceaseless, solitary thoughts. Within this thoughtfully self-fashioned solitude, the quiet, persistent hum of his own ideas grew ever more pronounced, filling the silent spaces where conventional interaction might once have been. His thoughts, intricate and remarkably far-reaching, continued their relentless internal dance, forming new patterns, continually refining old ones. He spent countless hours in deep contemplation, allowing his mind to wander freely through the vast landscapes of physics, the mysteries of electricity, and the very subtle fabric of existence itself. The deliberate absence of external noise allowed these profound internal investigations to deepen considerably, to settle gently, and to ripen slowly into fully formed concepts. His days, by this stage, had settled into a steady, unhurried cadence, marked by periods of intense intellectual engagement, moments of quiet, observant reflection, and the simple, comforting companionship of his winged friends. He had, by this point, carefully forged a life entirely on his own terms, rich in deep thought and devoid of unnecessary distractions. While the bustling world outside might have perceived a fading presence, his internal world remained wonderfully vibrant, meticulously cataloging observations and insights that would, in the fullness of time, prove to be far ahead of their era. The peaceful quietude of these later years, though outwardly appearing withdrawn, served as a crucial incubation period, a time when his most profound contributions were quietly solidified, waiting patiently for a future generation to truly discover and appreciate their immense scope and lasting importance. Following his quiet departure, a subtle shift began to unfold, almost imperceptibly at first, like the slow dawn after a very long night. The detailed notes and intricate observations he had so diligently compiled during those peaceful later years lay undisturbed for a time, a testament to a mind that saw connections others simply missed. It was not an immediate revelation, no sudden grand pronouncement, but rather a gentle stir, a soft rustling among those few who knew of his meticulous efforts. A colleague, perhaps, sifting through old correspondence, might stumble upon a concept that, in retrospect, seemed remarkably prescient. A student, years later, seeking original sources, could unearth a particular treatise and find its arguments surprisingly coherent, even innovative for their era. The initial whispers were tentative, thoughtful, slowly building a barely discernible current of interest around the ideas he had so quietly nurtured. Over the subsequent decades, as the intellectual landscape gradually evolved, the true depth of his contributions began to emerge with a quiet, undeniable clarity. It was akin to clearing away layers of dust from an old, forgotten fresco. Each careful brushstroke revealed more of the original vibrant image. Researchers, working in entirely new fields, occasionally found themselves retreading paths he had explored long ago, only to discover his original maps were far more accurate and comprehensive than previously imagined. His methodologies, once deemed idiosyncratic or overly complex, now aligned perfectly with emerging scientific principles, offering elegant solutions to questions that had only recently been formulated. It became apparent that his vision had simply outstretched the capacity of his contemporaries to fully grasp its implications, like a distant star whose light takes centuries to reach the Earth. This slow but steady rediscovery gradually painted a more complete picture of a mind operating on a different temporal plane. The scattered pieces of his life's work, the philosophical treatises, the detailed scientific logs, the insightful social commentaries, began to coalesce into a cohesive, interconnected body of thought. It was no longer just about individual brilliant observations, but about the vast, interwoven tapestry he had quietly woven, anticipating intellectual movements and technological advancements by decades, sometimes even centuries. The sheer breadth of his foresight, coupled with the rigorous detail of his work, quietly commanded a new kind of respect. His was not a legacy that burst forth in a blaze of glory, but one that gradually, patiently illuminated its own enduring significance, slowly revealing a genius whose subtle light was simply ahead of its time. And so, with this gradual illumination, a new understanding of his journey began to settle. We have traced the quiet arc of his life, from its early promise to its industrious yet largely unheralded culmination. Now, as the full extent of his quiet brilliance slowly comes into focus, it is perhaps time to pause, to reflect, not on the frantic pace of discovery, but on the enduring quality of a life dedicated to thoughtful inquiry, to consider the gentle echoes of his work, which continue to resonate softly through the corridors of time. And so, as the final murmurs of Tesla's remarkable path begin to softly recede, let us allow these gentle echoes of his life to quietly settle within us. No need to grasp at specific dates or the precise mechanics of his many inventions now. The intricate details, the bustling laboratories, the sudden flashes of insight, they can all softly drift away like distant wisps of smoke on a perfectly still evening. We have journeyed through a landscape of quiet dedication and persistent thought. Now, the contours of that journey, once sharp with historical fact, gradually soften at the edges, blurring into a more diffused, comforting impression. A feeling, perhaps, of what it means to live a life absorbed in unseen forces. The steady, quiet hum of history, which has accompanied us through the corridors of the past, now begins its slow, deliberate fade into a peaceful stillness. Imagine it not as an abrupt cessation, but rather as a distant, almost imperceptible sound, like the very last faint resonance of a bell. There is no urgency in this diminishing, allowing the mind to gently release its focus. Your thoughts, which have perhaps followed the fascinating currents of Tesla's experiences, can now simply float, unburdened by any further inquiry. It is a moment to completely let go, to allow the profound quiet of the present to envelop you, softly and completely. With this gentle, unhurried release, perhaps your eyes are already growing heavy, naturally seeking the comforting darkness. There is no longer any need to keep them open now, not if they wish to close. Allow your eyelids to softly descend, slowly and gently, like a natural, protective curtain, shielding your vision from the demands of the waking world. Feel the gentle weight of them, a soothing signal for your entire being to begin its gradual descent into a much deeper state of calm. This is a precious moment for simple, unhurried rest, for the quiet contemplation of peace itself. Let your breath become beautifully slow and even, a steady, rhythmic cadence, guiding you deeper. As the last vestiges of our shared historical journey slowly dissipate, leaving behind only the softest, most ethereal echoes, allow yourself to simply drift. Drift into a quiet reflection that asks nothing of you, demanding no analysis, no hurried conclusions, no further effort. Just a vast, encompassing, peaceful stillness, like a calm, starless lake under a moonless, velvet sky. Let the gentle, soothing currents of rest carry you now, effortlessly, deeper and deeper into slumber. The work is done, the story told. All that remains is this profound quiet, inviting you to rest deeply, truly deeply, until the gentle light of a new day.